1986 Volgograd region. It all started with a corpse that was found on the territory of one village council. In early May of that year, a retired officer went out into nature to fish on the bank of the Aksai River, Neta from the 6th in Oktyabrsky Rana. During fishing, the hook got caught on something, a drowned man, at the beginning of the swimming season, alas. A common thing. The members of the operational group did not expect any surprises from the trip, but as it turned out, in vain. The catch was terrible. The man was pulled out of the water naked, badly mutilated body, soon on the bank of the river. Already work operational group. The head of the department, Captain Yuri Stepanov, drew attention to a piece of rope that was dangling from the leg of the murdered man. Divers examined the bottom of the river and found that the other end of the rope was tied to a disc. The criminal was clearly trying to make sure that the corpse remained at the bottom of the river forever. He did not take into account only that the rope could have gotten wet. They tortured him, including with electric current. They also found a piece of a rapier sharpened to look like an arrow. The man was pierced with it more than 20 times. When the torture was over, a steel wheel was tied to the body, and he was drowned. None of the detectives in the group seemed familiar with the deceased. Non-locals decided that the detectives' facial features allowed them to classify the drowned man as Caucasian. There were several dozen sheep farms in the area. As a rule, Caucasians ran them. Numerous relatives and acquaintances from their native republics, or simply fellow countrymen for whom relatives were asking, were there. First of all, photographs of the deceased. They decided to show them medical scars on the deceased's body became another clue. Apparently, at different times, he had undergone several operations: appendicitis, maxillofacial surgery. But it was not possible to establish the identity of the deceased. The body had been underwater for a long time. It was decided to re-examine the murder scene again. Studied the bottom of the river in the place where they found the body, but to no avail. Examining the area nearby, Yuri Stepanov drew attention to a strange patch of land. Removing the top layer of soil, found ashes. The captain suggested that since the murdered man was thrown into the water naked, his clothes were burned in this place during sifting a charred Muslim pendant. It was by this pendant that they managed to find out whose body was found at the bottom of Aksai. It was an unemployed resident of the suburbs of Volgograd, Jigan Muslimovskoy, in order to get a few rubles for the next holiday. But according to the money, he bought new shoes, and to all questions about the source of income, he happily joked and mysteriously winked. He is a gangster and is connected with very important people. Thinking about possible causes of death, the new one on the leg, death as a result of an accident, also excluded because of the load, and because the body of the deceased was covered with numerous stab wounds. By the way, in the inspection report, not only fatal blows inflicted by a sharp stabbing object were mentioned. The experts drew attention to strange marks on the body of Muslimov, as if from an electric current. It seemed that before his death, the man was tortured. The killers wanted to force him to confess to something, or on the contrary, punish him. When will the detectives find out what Muslimov has been doing lately, and most importantly, under whose leadership? The information about torture attracted the detectives' special attention, also because not long ago their colleagues accepted another criminal case for production. The victim, a resident of a neighboring village, was attacked in his own home. To force the man to give them valuables, in the evening, he decided to check. The gate was locked, but as soon as he opened the front door, he received a powerful blow to the chest. "I am losing consciousness." The pensioner. The robbers dragged him into the room and demanded that he give money and valuables. The elderly man gave everything that was left of his pension and assured that there was nothing in the house. The robber noticed the working TV. He cut the cord, quickly stripped the wires, and then plugged the plug back into the socket. They began to torture the old man with electric shocks. Unable to bear it, the pensioner confessed that he had a hiding place in which 3,000 rubles were hidden for a rainy day, but the bandits were sure that the pensioner had more than one hiding place but several, so the torture with electricity would continue. The killers found silver jewelry of the deceased wife, taking the contents from the hiding place, and seeing how frightened the night guests were in the pensioner's house, a neighbor noticed and reported this to the police, but the grandfather, who barely survived the torture, began to play there was no one, and they did not beat, the victim assured. I drank too much, tripped, and accidentally ran into a knife, and my neighbor is over 80. She has a vision. However, during a short conversation with the pensioner, the detectives noticed familiar burn marks on his neck and face. The investigators were sure that the pensioner's house had been raided and that an electrician had participated in the murder of Zhigan Muslimov. After some time, the old man finally cracked but said that he did not know any of the criminals, even by sight, which meant that they were unlikely to be residents of the village, but they probably had acquaintances here who had brought them gossip about the old man's wealth. The question arose whether it was by chance or on purpose. The detectives asked the old man to describe his attackers. He especially remembered one powerful robber. It was he who tortured the old man with electricity. The detectives exchanged glances. One giant was listed in the police file. However, he became famous before he first appeared in the local crime chronicle. Valentin Solodunov was well known in the Oktyabrsky district. Some of the operatives even studied with him in the same school. They say in those years he was a tough guy, never missed a single village fight. Moreover, he always acted on the side of those who managed to gather fewer people. He received his first conviction shortly after the army for theft the second time, went to jail immediately after his first term. It is interesting that everyone who saw Solodunov noted his powerful physique, while those who had the chance to communicate with him claimed that the guy's strength was not only in his muscles. At the age of 20, Solodunov managed to graduate from college between terms. By the age of 35, acquired a peculiar hobby. Detectives who visited his home during searches paid attention to the large amount of specialized legal literature. During interrogations, Solodunov talked with investigators on abstract topics. However, the stories that fellow villagers told about him most often concerned his criminal exploits. Solodunov's fellow countrymen recalled one of his criminal cases, theft of a safe from a local savings bank. The young man was naturally interested in its contents, not wanting to be caught at the scene of the crime. He simply put the iron box on his back and carried it into the forest. The fact that the safe weighed about 120 kilograms, Solodunov was not embarrassed. He opened it and then threw it into the lake by the way, the same lake from where Muslimov's body was fished out. Solodunov was surrounded. It was not excluded that he could resist, but Valentin was caught practically in a t-shirt and boxer shorts, not to give or take. A simple Soviet man, sincerely surprised that the police were detaining him in the rooms. Nothing strange could be found. It was left to check under the floor. When the operatives began to inspect the walls of the basement, then one of the bricks suddenly swayed in the masonry. From the hiding place, they took out a box in which lay a large sum of money and gold jewelry. Valentin Solodunov immediately declared, "Excellent, in my house treasure I am owed 25%. But he was quickly and clearly explained that sooner or later the robbed people will recognize their things, and he will also have to answer for the murder for which he will face the death penalty." The strawman seemed to have been replaced. He did not expect that the body, carefully hidden at the bottom of the river, would ever be found. The motive for the murder of Muslimov remained unclear. There was little information about him. Lived in Volgograd, where he settled after another prison term. A certain place of residence, did not have a permanent job. Also on the path of correction, apparently did not get on the path of correction. In any case, among his connections were still listed thieves, informant, on other criminal elements. With some of the men he was in conflict. Detectives found out that Solodunov guests from Volgograd villagers said that they had repeatedly seen a taxi car near Solodunov's house. that had obviously arrived from the city brand new yellow with checkers. The detectives decided to check whether there were any convicted persons among the employees of the city auto park who had the opportunity to regularly leave the city quite quickly. The detectives came across 30-year-old Vladimir Ponomarev and urgently left for the regional center. However, they were unable to catch the guy at work. Volgograd detectives beat them to it. They were not surprised to learn that colleagues from the outskirts were interested in Ponomarev. They explained that he had gone to the pretrial detention center in the company of a native of the Oktyabrsky district. They also had something to ask the guests. The detectives from Oktyabrsky knew 28-year-old Sergei Kosenko well. The guy had already been convicted of theft. This time he was suspected of committing a particularly serious crime. A Volgograd dentist became the victim of a robbery. 4 people lay in wait for him near his house, grabbed him, put him in a car, took him out of town, and there they began to torture the victim, often worked hard. Therefore, he was a very wealthy man. He agreed to give the criminals everything he kept in a hiding place, explained that if he had said no, he would probably have died of pain, because the kidnappers achieved what they wanted with the help of electric current. The criminals' spoils were a large amount of gold jewelry. The operatives expected that they would try to turn them into cash as quickly as possible, and so it happened. 2 were detained in a pawn shop. These 2 were Kosenko and Ponomarev. Once in the cell, quickly handed over not only their accomplices, but also their victims. They found reasons not to contact the police. Criminals reported to sell the stolen valuables. They went on the instructions of Valentin Solinov. That same day, the strongman from Oktyabrsky joined his accomplices in the detention center. He did not deny his participation in the attack on the dentist and said that he considered this a crime only from the point of view of the law and from the point of view of morality. Everything is correct because they took only what was acquired dishonestly. To the question of how they knew about the doctor's left income's answer from Muslimov. This tip became Muslimov's entry fee to the group of extortionists. The attack on the dentist was not the first. It turned out Solojunov and his accomplices honed their robbery skills on his fellow countrymen, those who trade in meat, milk, and leather. The residents of the Oktyabrsky district did not contact the police because they themselves cheated with the delivery of goods to the state the criminals felt in. Security were sure that the victims would remain silent, and they, for their part, tried to do everything to avoid suspicion. But rumors reached them that Muslimov, having become a member of the gang, immediately began to brag about it in order to raise his authority, and they decided to get rid of him. Solojunov surprisingly easily made contact with the investigation, apparently in the hope of earning leniency. He completely denied that he had just led younger friends. Reading legal literature was not in vain. The criminal was afraid that he would be recognized as the leader of the gang. The punishment in this case could be the most severe, up to the death penalty. Trying to divert suspicion from himself in organizing a criminal group, Solojunov said that the truly dangerous person at large was some criminal nicknamed Ludi, and he was only one of the gang members. Only in it 6 people, and the leader lives in Volgograd. The leader of those who held the raiders in unquestioning obedience turned out to be a certain Nikoletov, previously sentenced to 10 years in prison for theft and robbery, and despite the formidable nickname Ludi, he was short and admitted that he could appear. His mistress had an address that he knew, and there it was. To set an ambush. The detectives had information and it should appear in one of his acquaintances at the girl's house. They decided to set an ambush. 2 operatives went there, Nika and Yuri Stepanov, the same head of the police investigation from the Oktyabrsky OVD. No one knew exactly what the criminal looked like at the disposal. The group's operatives had only a 3x4 photo taken 6 years ago. That evening near the house of the criminal's girlfriend, the policeman split up. Stepanov and the young officer went up to the apartment. Ludi's mistress unconditionally subordinated the police and let the operatives into the house. Their colleague Kukushkin remained in the entrance. The doorbell and the landlady hurried to open it. 3 people were standing on the threshold. Ludi himself and his arrest attempt failed. Those who were with Lyot started scandal. How dare you let us go? We just came to visit. Ludi used these seconds. He pulled out a knife and struck the first blow to the chest of Captain Yuri Stepanov. The second blow with a knife landed in the stomach, throwing to help Valery Savin. Those who were with Sidorov ran out onto the landing, and he himself continued to strike precise and merciless knife blows to police officers. Operative Kukushkin, who was standing in the entrance, he rushed up the stairs but did not have time to enter the apartment. He was stabbed already on the stairwell. An attempt to detain the attackers failed. Stenov died on the spot without regaining consciousness. Valery Savin received penetrating completely. Captain Yuri Stepanov died on the spot without regaining consciousness. Valery Savin received 8 penetrating knife wounds but was still alive and was taken to intensive care. He lost a lot of blood, and Operative Kukushkin, who was stabbed, died with the first rays of the sun. Kukushkin was lucky he had a serious wound, but only one. He survived the hunt for Lutov. Began exits from Volgograd were blocked. Reinforced patrols checked buses, trucks and private cars in case of emergency. It was allowed to shoot to kill. The police used a secret apparatus of informants. Someone had to know where Ludi was hiding at that time. His mistress hastily threw all the necessary things in a hurry to the station. She really wanted to escape, thinking that having easily interrupted the police ambush in her apartment, Nikolai Sidorov would definitely return to take revenge. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The woman turned whole and tiptoed out into the corridor, looking through the peephole behind the door. He stood there, turned around, and left forever. After a few days, the operatives managed to find out where Nikolai Sidorov was hiding. His rearrest was being prepared especially carefully. The private house where Ludi was hiding was surrounded. Sidorov noticed policemen through the window, understood everything, and went out with his hands up. He didn't resist at all. Once Valentin Solojunov graduated from the Physical Culture Institute and dreamed of becoming a famous athlete, but stumbled on his life path. Candidate for Master of Sports in weightlifting. He is a solid, healthy guy, but he wanted money right here and now. The strongman decided to steal from his neighbor's apartment. He was detained almost immediately, given a year in prison after serving his sentence. About the career of an athlete, Solojunov had to forget. Then he studied to be an electrician and got a job at a power plant. The salary was still small, but he figured out how to increase it. He could tear off the wire, say that he found a violation, and offered to pay him for not drawing up a report, and people paid. In the end, he was admitted complaint, and the electrician went back to jail. In prison, he met Lyot there. They hatched a plan to commit more daring and serious crimes. Once they were free after serving their sentence, Solojunov and Sidorov began to implement their plan. They decided to attack lonely pensioners, torture, and, if necessary, and kill. Then, in the Volgograd region, a series of brutal robberies began, which the police found out about only many months later. The unfortunate people were so intimidated that they kept silent. Very often they torture their victims with electric current. Solojunov could build an electric chair in a matter of minutes from scrap materials and wires. Soon to commit the raids, the couple of killers needed assistance, so 4 more people appeared in the gang. Among them was also an alcoholic, Muslumov. However, a couple of months later, it became known that Muslumov had declared himself a gangster. The ringleader was worried that he was talking too much. Muslumov was taken out of town and brutally tortured, but he confessed that he had told no one anything except stupid praise. But they did not believe him and decided to kill him and drowned his body. Soon a trial took place. The group of Solojunov and Sidorov were charged with the rare in those years Article 77 of banditry in the USSR. It was banned. The Vedas believed that the last gang was defeated in the post-war 40s. However, information about this criminal case even made it into the central newspapers. The party organs allowed a large article to be published in the Izvestia newspaper. Ordinary members of the gang received from 6 to 12 years of imprisonment. Nikolai Sidorov. Volgograd Regional Court sentenced Valentin Solodunov to capital punishment. He was sent to prison for 15 years. He was released in the wild 90s. After that, he was seen several times in his native village. The bandit came there accompanied by security, and in such cars that no one doubted that he easily fit into the new reality. And at the beginning of the 21st century, rumors reached fellow villagers that Solodunov died from a bandit's bullet. This is the Crime DOCS channel. Subscribe, like, and leave comments. It is very important for me to know your opinion.